Hey Algebra 1, I'm going to review 9.3, solving quadratic equations by finding square roots. Okay, that's the key word here, is we're going to be solving using square roots, okay? So when you look at all these problems, they all have some number, right, a, which in a lot of cases is just 1. Like here it's 1, number 1 it's 1, and number 2 it's 1, number 4 it's 1. But if we go down here, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's like 5 or 3, okay? So whatever the case, we're going to have some number a. And then we'll have x squared equals another number, such as 36, or 9, or 32, or 1, or 72. So we're going to have one number on the left and one number on the right. And that's what we have to have in order to solve by using square roots, okay? Now in the last couple sections, if you did factoring, we had to set it equal to 0. Like this. Or we have parentheses, x plus 2 for example, and x plus 3 equal to 0. But now with square roots, we need to have one term on the left and one term on the right. So let's look at our first problem. Okay, so what we want to do here, I'm just going to show you how to do it the first time and then I'll explain it. Okay, so if I have x squared here, one on the left and one on the right at 36, what I can do is I could just take the square root of both sides. And if I'm taking the square root of x squared, that is equal to x. And the square root of 36 is 6. But we have to remember that when I take the square root of 36, that's equal to 6, right? Because 6 times 6 is 36. But I could also multiply negative 6 times negative 6, and that also gives me 36, because remember, a negative times a negative equals a positive. So what that means is that I have two possibilities, or two answers, two solutions. So we write plus and minus. Let me choose a different color actually. So we would write plus and minus 6. And that symbol just means that 6 can be both positive and it can be negative. But the way I want you to write out your answers is x equals both positive 6 and negative 6, separated by a comma. Okay? But don't forget that it could be plus and minus. So to go through number 2 quickly, again, we would square root this one, square root this one. X equals, square root of 9 is 3, but then we also have, could be negative 3, okay, because we want a positive answer and a negative answer. Okay, so let's look at number 3. It's a little different. So again, steps are the same. I have one term here, x squared, so that means I can square root both sides. And this becomes x. But then when I try to plug this in the calculator, I get some decimal number. So let's pull up my calculator and show you. So let's say I do 80, and I want the square root. Oops, sorry, I have to put square root first. So square root of 80, 8 equals some crazy decimal number, 8.94427, and it keeps going. Alright, so that's not really a perfect square. We don't want that. Okay, so if that's the case, then you're just going to leave that 80 in the square root. But then don't forget that we can still have a plus and a minus answer. So how you'll write your answer now is x equals the square root of 80, the positive version, and then it also equals the negative version, negative square root of 80. Okay? Because we're not going to do it in decimal form. Even though you could write it in decimal form, you could take the decimal of that and write 8.94 and negative 8.94. Okay, so now let's do the same thing here. Square root, but now we have a fraction. Okay, now when we square root fractions, we square root the top and then we square root the bottom. So here, square root of x is, first, x squared is x. And then we square root the top, so really what we're doing is square root of the 4, and then we take the square root of 9. So we know the square root of 4 is 2, the square root of 9 is 3. But again, remember that, don't forget that it could be both plus and minus. So then our answer would be x equals plus 2 over 3, or positive, and negative 2 over 3. Okay, let's go to number 9. Okay, now here's a case where I have a negative number on the right side. So let's try to take the square root. Square root of this, square root of this. Okay, we know the square root of x squared is x, but what's the square root of negative 4? Remember, square root, you're looking for a number that if I multiply that same number twice, it will give me this number, negative 4. Okay, so let's see. 2 times 2, that gives me positive 4, so no. Negative 2 times negative 2, no, that still gives me positive 4. So it doesn't work. Because you can't do negative 2 and positive 2, because that's not the same number. We need a number that we're multiplying the same twice. So then in this case, it's no solution. So really, if you ever get a negative number and you take the square root of it, it's no solution. Okay? Okay, now let's jump on down here to 17. Because all the other problems you should be able to do. Actually, let's take a look at number 11. It's just a tad different than the other ones. Alright, so now again, let's take the square root of both sides. Let's pick my blue again. So now x here, and then we'll take the square root of 5, and then the square root of 36. Okay, so square root of 5. Do that on the calculator. Square root of 5. Well, that gives us a decimal answer. We don't want that. So what you're going to do is leave that 5 in the square root. And then the square root of 36 we know is 6. So you'll have a square root on the top. But again, remember that you can have plus and minus. So now our answer is x equals square root of 5 over 6. And then the negative square root of 5 over 6. Okay? Okay, let's look at a couple more. Now, how about this one? Now again, here, our first number, the a, is bigger than 1 this time. But in order to take the square root like we've been doing, this number has to be 1. Just like here, or here, or here. Not any of the problems we just did. So we need to get rid of this 5. And to do that, do it like you would with any other equation. Divide by 5. Or divide by whatever that number is. Okay, and that cancels out. So now we have x squared equals 90 divided by 5 is 18. And now, since we have x squared by itself, we can square root. And if you plug this in on a calculator, square root of 18 comes out to a crazy decimal number, so we'll have to leave this as square root of 18 and negative square root of 18. Okay, last one. One right below it. Okay, so now, again, remember, we have to have one number on the left of the equal sign and one number on the other side of the equal sign. And here we have 1 and 2 numbers on the left. So here, remember, we want x squared on the left side, so that means we need to get rid of this 30, or remove it, make it 0. So let's subtract 30 from both sides, and that will get rid of it. Now we'll have 2x squared equals 42 minus 30, which is 12. But then again, we still have this 2, because remember, we just want x squared. So now divide by the 2, and now x squared equals 6. And again, take the square root. And square root of 6 doesn't come out to a nice number. It comes out to a decimal. So we'll leave it as a square root of 6. Now we'll have square root of 6 and negative square root of 6. and that's it.